Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Church of Staten Island online. I'm Ruth Benson, and I'm speaking to you from my home on the beautiful North Shore of Staten Island. Today's opening is called Co-Regulation by Elizabeth Mount. From our very first breath, we reach out. Co-regulation, not self-regulation, is in our nature. We find our cues from the sun and the moon, from each parent and caregiver. We find our place in this great turning point, this great turning planet, by turning to one another, generation to generation. We awaken to the dawn and we fall asleep at the evening's end. Our life's journey is part of something greater, something simple, something divine. A flame cannot be lit without a spark. A life cannot begin without the air. And we cannot begin to find ourselves without love. May we reach out to one another. May we offer love and nurturing care. May we join together in celebration of the interdependence of our lives. In this spirit, let us worship together. And now, Dave Michaels will light our chalice.
Good morning. We light this chalice in the search for truth and the spirit of love. We unite in worship and fellowship. Wow. And as an extension of lighting our chalice, I want to take a moment of silence to light a candle for some of the names of those who have recently been affected by police brutality. We cannot cover all of the names of those affected. I will light this candle for the life of Olaji M. So, for the life of Miriam Carey, and for the life of Richard Lee Richards. May this light be a symbol of our commitment to continue the work of racial justice and to proclaim that Black Lives Matter.
Thank you, Dave. And now, our opening hymn with Kevin and Carolyn is Gathered Here.
Gathered here in the mystery of this hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power, Spirit draw near. Gather here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power, Spirit draw near.
And now we'll join Dave in hearing our joys and sorrows.
Yeah, thank you, Ruth and Kevin. So now is a time in our service where we invite you to speak aloud your joys and sorrows. If you're visiting with us for the first time, this is a time where you can introduce yourself if you want to and tell us a little about yourself. You can also write your joys and concerns in the chat below your screen, or you can speak them aloud. So maybe I'll share from Kathy. She writes, joy that we got to be with family this holiday season, but sorrow that our newest granddaughter has returned to her home in Vancouver with her parents. Thank you, Kathy.
Joy that I have optimism about this next new year, and there's a lot of future opportunities that are present. But sorrow that I had to bring in the New Year's alone.
Thank you, Jennifer. Unitarian Church writes, who's that? That's Ruth. Is that you? Our joy is that we are dog sitting Coco.
No, that's not me.
Oh, who's logged in on Unitarian? Oh, sorry, Sally and David. You guys are the ones logged in on the Unitarian Church. They're Coco. Nice. I should have looked up at the screen and saw Coco before I opened my mouth. Nice. Go ahead, Suzanne.
I'm Suzanne O'Callahan. My husband, John Walker, is on here. My husband of 33 years, and he had a 6-hour surgery last Monday for his heart, and he is doing wonderful. And he's had no AFib episodes since that surgery. So I'm very thankful. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. I have a joy. I'm happy to be part of this service, and it's funny because I wanted to say hi to a couple of friends. Tat Fu Tan, maybe some of you remember, he spoke here a few times. Also, my friend Mohammed, because Tat Fu actually told me a little over a year ago, I think, right, Tat Fu, that he's been studying Sufism, and so a bunch of us, including my friend Mohammed, Tat Fu, a few others that aren't here, we're getting together to discuss Sufism. So it's awesome to have Khalil here to learn more about it. So I'm psyched. And I also wanted to say I felt after I said thank you, Kevin, and thank you, Ruth, but I didn't say thank you to Carolyn, who was playing piano in the background. So I wanted to add that in too. Any other joys or sorrows this morning? Okay, if not, oh yes, Kathy, please. You have to unmute yourself, Kathy.
Sorry. Just want to remind everyone that Bruce Gillum is still in Clove Lakes. I know that Sally went to visit him, what was it, yesterday, I think. And he does have COVID, but he seems to be doing well, except that, of course, he's not completely happy that he's at Clove Lakes.
I'll put the phone number in the chat.
And the phone number, if you want to call him to keep him a little company, is going into the chat. Tom is going to put it in the chat.
How about the address, Kathy?
I know it's on Fanning Street.
Okay, I got it.
21 Fanning.
What is it?
21, I believe. Right off the highway. It's 25. I'm being corrected.
25 Fanning. And that phone number Tom notes has changed. So if you think you have Bruce's number, you may have the wrong one. So Tom put the new one in the chat. 347-671-8354. Anybody else? If not, why don't we just take a brief moment of silence to hold these joys and sorrows in our hearts?
Yes, I think, Dave, that we'll take a moment of meditation as we enter into this moment. Let us reflect upon what has been shared and what is in our hearts and what we anticipate as we enter another new year. What are our expectations for 2022, our hopes and our challenges? And how will we meet these? We have our 7 Unitarian Universalists to guide us. And now, just a moment to meditate. Thank you. And now it gives me tremendous pleasure once again to welcome Ghanim to our service. He's an old friend and he's been with us many times before. But just to remind you all, or perhaps for those of you who are not familiar with him, I'm going to give you a little bit of his background. So Ghanim is, I'm having trouble. I'm terribly sorry. Sally, I am getting Dave on my full screen, so I'm a little confused about
Am I supposed to read the poem first, Ruth, or?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, you are absolutely right. Let's go right ahead.
Yeah, and Ruth, just if you go up to view on your upper right and change it to gallery, you'll see everybody.
Okay, have done. Yes, I'm sorry. Of course, before we introduce Ghanim, Dave is going to read us a poem from Rumi.
Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you.
I am the dust in the sunlight. I am the ball of the sun. I am the mist of morning, the breath of evening. I am the spark in the stone, the gleam of gold in the metal, the rose and the nightingale drunk with its fragrance. I am the chain of being, the circle of the spheres, the scale of creation, the rise and the fall. I am what is and is not. I am the soul in all.
Thank you, Dave. That's so beautiful. And now, Dave, I think you're going to go ahead.
Yeah, take the offering. Now's the time. Thank you, Ruth. Now's the time in our order of service where we take an offering. We know it's the gifts of all of us that help support our ability to thrive and gather online. Links and instructions will be posted in the chat. You can mail us a check or donate to our PayPal giving page. Please give as generously as you can, and your offering will be gratefully received. Thank you.
And Kevin and Carolyn, we have the offertory music. you, Carolyn. And now, this really is the time when I'm going to introduce Ghanim. So here we are. As I said before, we know him so well. He's been with us many times before, but be that as it may, I think I want to just give you a little bit of an introduction for those who may not know him. And so let me just say that he is a naturalized American citizen of Pakistani descent, and he was born in South Yorkshire, England. His parents immigrated to Brooklyn in 1987 when he was 11 years old. He became an American citizen in 1992. After he completed his active duty enlistment in the US Marine Corps in 1999, followed by 2 years in active reserve, he joined the Army National Guard in 2003. And he became active in the anti-war movement and publicly spoke out against the war in Iraq, which he considered to be immoral. He is a practicing Muslim, a writer, and a longtime student of history. So, Ghanim, welcome. Always a pleasure to be with you. And we have some things that we're going to discuss about Sufism. So I think let me begin by saying that when we first began to talk about Sufism, you spoke of a sort of a vertical and horizontal structure. So the vertical being that between the individual, the person, and the divine, and the horizontal being that relationship among all between and among all people, and then going also into a duty to all of creation. And that made me think of our seventh Unitarian Universalist principle, which is to affirm and promote the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. And it felt like a nice fit. So I wonder if you can say how this might be conceptualized in Sufism.
Sure. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abdahu wa rasuluh. Thank you, Sally, for introducing me. It was a very good introduction. A lot of information just in a few sentences. That's good. Sufism is the fruit of Islam. So we have Islam, which is the religion, and then we have Iman, which is the belief in that faith and the following of that faith. And then we have Ihsan, which is the beautification of the self after you've followed it and perfected to the utmost of your ability. So Sufism is the flowering of a good human being. Now everything is created, and then there's a creator. So there's a vertical relationship between each living thing and the creator. And it's not just living things, it's also abiotic things like the earth, rocks, rain, water, the sun, the stars, everything else. So when it comes to human beings, we have a relationship, a vertical one with our creator. We say Allah. Allah simply means the God, because we believe in one God, the God. So the relationship between the human being and God is that human beings obey God, and so they therefore build a strong vertical relationship with God. And when they do that, they understand that they have also a horizontal relationship between other humans, all humans on the planet. And they also even have a relationship with humans who have passed away and humans who haven't come yet. So there's also that, multidimensional aspect of the horizontal relationship between the individual and other human beings. But that also extends to nature. So every living thing that you find, it extends to that, the horizontal relationship. So Islam is about that relationship. And when you actually put that relationship into practice, that's called Sufism in the West. We in Islam, in Arabic, it's ilmi tasawwuf, knowledge of, the purification of the self, the beautification of the self. But, in the West, they say Sufism. So that is just like a nutshell how the relationship works. Now, the important thing to remember when you're studying Sufism is that its roots are Islam. And the growth of the tree, it's like a tree. So the roots are the foundations, and that's Islam. The growth of the tree into different branches and leaves, that's Iman in action, faith in action. And then, of course, the flowering of that tree in springtime and the fruits and nuts and berries, whichever tree you decide to choose for your example, that is the ihsan, the beautification, the Sufism aspect. Another important thing to remember is that if you don't have a good vertical or a horizontal relationship with the rest of creation, the vertical relationship doesn't matter much to the creator. You must have a good relationship with creation in order to have a good relationship with the creator. And if you don't have a good relationship with the creator, then your relationship with the created is going to be disfigured. It's not going to be the proper relationship you're supposed to have. There's going to be no balance. So you require both relationships at the same time. So you develop them within yourselves at the same time.
Okay, thanks. So just to repeat what you just had told us, that Islam is the foundation of Sufism. So Islam is like the roots of the tree, but Sufism is the branching and the flowering of that tree. And you also spoke about self-transformation. So Sufism seeks to tame the ego and to transform the self according to the virtues of Sufism, which we talked about when we had this discussion prior to putting the service together. And so I just wanted to name some of the virtues that you outlined to me. And so they would include knowledge seeking, introspection, sincerity, humility, truthfulness, gratitude, and patience, which is in itself just an amazing and wonderful virtue, so hard to practice, I find. And so my question for you is, how does one practice Sufism in an age of secularism and materialism?
So let's just explain secularism and materialism in the proper context of the relationship with Sufism. So we're created beings, everything's created. Materialism, I could talk about materialism all day, but if I had to just explain it really quickly, it's the reduction of all reality to the basic, which is the physical aspect. And secularism is the could be defined as the separation of the sacred and the profane. The profane being the everyday normal things that we do, our actions that are visible at all times, and the sacred being the purpose of those actions. So when you separate the purpose of those actions from the actions themselves, you create what's called a dichotomy. And sometimes that dichotomy is an opposition of two different things. So that's why people say the sacred versus the profane, or they say and in between sacred and profane. In Islam, everything's holistic, everything is connected. Every breath you take is connected to the breath that the people in the future are going to take. Everything that you plant is connected to the past and the future. Everything that you do, every action that you take, if you take it with sincerity, that has a positive impact. But every action you take that is negative, that has a negative impact on society, continues. So everything is connected. So we don't believe in materialism. We believe that there are materials, but everything has a purpose. Everything has a transitory existence in this world. So we were positioned in this world through birth in order to travel through the world, to find ourselves, to seek that which is the good in the self that Allah, the Creator, put in ourselves. And then we go through this world as if it's a journey. That's how it is described by our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He described life as being a journey. And so as you're journeying through this life, you know that it's temporary and the lasting life comes after death. So materialism doesn't really make sense to us as a philosophy, nor does secularism make sense to us. You can have human rights and all those other things without expressing it through secular points of view. That's a very difficult thing for Western scholars to understand at first, but once they dig into other civilizations and other ways of life, they find out that there are different ways of expressing human rights, things that secularism is defined, but within religious contexts or within traditional contexts that are non-Western. So I wanted to explain that before I went into like the Sufism's relationship to, how to practice it in an age of secularism and materialism. So today we're surrounded by commercialism. commercialism to the point where we're destroying the planet. And we're surrounded by a consumerism that is almost like a wave. It's unstoppable. So that requires the disciplining of the self in order to detach yourself from this culture of materialism, the culture of buying, the culture of, possessing. You have to possess the latest iPhone, or else you won't get the latest, HD graphics. Or I don't even know why people purchase the latest iPhones. I'm just guessing. But the attachment that we have to possessing things distracts us from our real purpose in life. And our real purpose is to develop that vertical relationship with the Creator so that we can have a good horizontal relationship with the rest of creation, humanity included. And so materialism is kind of like a distraction. It keeps us distracted from our real purpose. So Sufism comes in and it talks about how your actions are supposed to be sincere. So you're supposed to have patience, because the world today, the way it is, there's a lot of hate, there's a lot of confusion. Even though we're the most educated humanity on the planet at the moment, we're also the most ignorant of each other. At least in the ancient past, people traded with each other and they shared each other's view, and they valued trade, right? And they didn't value, insecurity. So they learned about each other. But today you have computers, cell phones, but no one really knows much about each other. We hate each other for no reason. We fear each other for no reason. When those are investigated, we see there's a lot of confusion. And this is a sad thing to be involved in. So Sufism comes in, and what it does is it breaks down your ego. It says that fear, you should only have fear of the Creator, fearing that he might not shade you with his love anymore because you disconnected yourself with him. So you can't have fear of anything else. You're supposed to learn about other people's cultures and their ways of life in order to cooperate with them, in order to assist them. You're supposed to have empathy. You're supposed to have compassion for everything. So Sufism teaches us these things, and it says that those are non-negotiable, that you must follow that path. And if you don't follow that path, you're compromising who you are as a human being. So humanity is defined as following the path of compassion, being empathetic towards others. And that's what God loves. That's what he wants us to do. That's what the Quran instructs us to do. That's what the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, told us to do. It doesn't mean being pushovers. It just means learning about others so that you can live in a cooperation and peaceful environment to create security for everybody. And that is what is lacking today. We don't even have security for the natural world. Forget security about, living with each other. We have to have compassion about animals, plants, all those things. So Sufism is about showing compassion and love towards all those things, understanding them, and then creating a world where everything exists in its own order, within a wider order. So, and that's because we're trying to achieve that horizontal and vertical relationship.
Mm. Yeah, I have a follow-up to this. And my question, and I'm couching it in something that you and I discussed. My question, as I formulated it, was how would you practice this, that, everything that you just said in your own life right now in this very commodified and indeed polarized world, which also you just referenced. And the reason that I'm following up with that is because when we had our discussion, one of the things that we talked about was you and I both know each other from our activism as in the war against Iraq, the Bush's war, and we were both anti-war activists. We began together in Peace Action at its very founding, Peace Action of Staten Island, and I know that you are as passionate and as dedicated to the causes of peace, the causes of social justice as you were then, and yet, as am I, and yet, in my personality, I am experiencing something very different from what you seem to experience. With me, it's stress, it's rage, it's fear, it's almost everything you were just talking about, kind of fighting against. And in talking about this with you, I asked you about yourself, and I was stunned and impressed at your equanimity in the face of where we're at. And so I had asked you and that was my follow-up question that I read to you from before, is how do you do it? Everything you just said to us about, how Sufism helps you to transcend these, these horrible reactions that we have, and these emotional, destructive reactions that we have. And you had told me a little bit about your religious practice and how it helps to center you and to calm you. And can you say a little bit about that?
Yeah, let's begin at the beginning of everything. When the human being was created, Allah blew into that human being something which made that human being alive. Our masters, our spiritual masters, they say that within every human being is embedded the true nature of things, the true nature of the self. We simply say fitra. That has to be rediscovered. When we're born and we're going through trials and tribulations, we get distracted by a lot of things on this earth. Now, we have to separate, to understand ourselves, we have to separate what is necessary for us and what is excessive. And human beings, the way we are naturally, we tend to incline towards what is excessive out of fear that we will lose what is required. So food, for example, shelter, protection, security, love. We have an innate insecurity about not being loved. This is universal. This is throughout human history. Poets have written about this. So Allah teaches us in the Quran that we have to create a balance, a discipline within ourselves to portion things out so that we can traverse the world in a way that's beneficial for the self and everybody else. So he instituted for us the 5 daily prayers. And what the 5 daily prayers does, it illuminates that fitra inside us. It makes that fitra shine. And when it shines, it affects our heart, it affects our mind, the way we think. So there's a psychological, spiritual, and physical action going on at the same time. And so the 5 daily prayers are for that reason, and we're worshiping the Creator at the same time. So everything is happening at once. We have fasting. We fast because that reduces the inclination towards selfishness and all, the ego, all the things that make us inhumane, that creates, that imprisons that part of you. Giving charity is a disassociation with possessing things, things that you think are of value, but really, when you study irrationally, money has no value in itself. It's a constructed thing, right? So charity controls that. Our belief that there's one creator and the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is the messenger, is the prophet that God sent to instruct us on how to behave. And he brought the Quran with us, the word of Allah with him, to instruct us about it. All of those things have an impact on our hearts. And all of those things have disciplined us to see reality in its proper form. And when that happens, when trials and tribulations happen, we can contextualize psychologically those problems. And we know in the end, there'll be pure justice. So when you know in the end, there'll be pure justice, there is no problem on the planet that cannot be endured. People endure problems in various degrees, and Allah only ordains for a person problems that person can endure, except death, of course. We can't endure death. We have to go through death. And so knowing all this and simultaneously disciplining ourselves through the rituals, I'm using English now, the rituals of Islam. We call them the treasures of Islam. We are able to discipline the soul in order to understand what our purpose is. And we can be a boat that sails through storms and through quiet waters. And there is no difference between the storms or the quiet waters, because Allah is with us the entire time.
So your spiritual practice then through your religion is what gives you this sense of peacefulness that you have.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. I referenced before that you and I met as anti-war activists. It was during the formation of Peace Action of Staten Island. And it was during the run-up to the Iraq War. And it must have been, it strikes me, very disturbing for you as a practicing Muslim to be viewed as a terrorist sympathizer or worse by a population that was angry and terrified, acting out against the other. And in light of your experience as a member of the Army National Guard and as a former US Marine, standing up against President Bush's unjust war on Iraq and going public with your dissent must have been a profoundly difficult decision for you to make. And I wonder if you could share with us a little bit of your experience and how you were able to hold fast to your Sufi virtues at that time.
So everybody goes through degrees of learning. And in our way of life in Islam, trials and tribulations are meant to beautify you. That's why Rumi talks a lot about like pain and grief. Everybody must go through their trials and tribulations, those things which are ordained for that person to go through. And to go through them with humility and patience is way better than going through them crying about it, right? Because one has a negative effect on you and the other one has a positive effect on you. Now, we only know this by hindsight. While we're going through the trials, everybody's complaining internally. We're human beings, we're not angels. So everybody's, we're not machines either, we're not programmed. So we're internally complaining constantly about things, right? But we have to channel that complaining into something productive. So patience allows us to do that. Now, when I was in the military, first of all, I went into the military because I was part of what military analysts call the poverty draft. When you're poor and you're looking for a way out of your poverty, and other people are depending upon you, your parents, your brothers and sisters, your family, they're depending upon you. It's easier to make wrong decisions, and it's easier to go into things which you later regret. So the poverty draft is what people call when poor people are driven into the military because they have no other economic option available to them. So I was part of the poverty draft, and it was in the Marines where I realized, well, man, people really hate Islam and they hate Muslims, but also being made fun of and being threatened transformed parts of me. And that transformation made me more patient, and it made me understand wisdom, the purpose of wisdom, why wisdom exists, and how wisdom must be developed. It just isn't given to you.
Yeah.
And people around me changed because I changed. So I continued to be, cooperative and kind with them. And of course, I was concerned about them because being ignorant and hateful is actually a malady, right? It's you're patient. And so I feel bad for you naturally. So that perspective helped me develop a thick skin when it came to challenging power. When I came out of the military, I went into the reserves. So I was still a Marine, but reserves. And when I was in the reserves, I could be easily activated, become active duty again. And so I switched over to our Army National Guard so that I would stay, in North America, in other words, that I wouldn't be deployed to Iraq, because I was following the whole chain of events leading up to the Iraq War. I knew there was going to be an Iraq War. I was just waiting for it to happen. Yeah. And just waiting for it. And so that's why I switched over to National Guard, because I thought, I won't go overseas and fight and murder people for, the security of wealthy people. So what I did was I switched over, and then my unit was going to be deployed. We were, getting ready to deploy. And I said, well, that only leaves me one choice. And that is I have to complete my contract, right? So my one choice was I'm going to speak out against it. And for me, it was a very easy and clear decision. It was as clear as night and day. It is as clear as, well, it's cloudy today. I was going to say, as the sun rising. It was clear because when you develop the self-discipline by practicing what the Quran instructs, it clarifies things to you. You can see things before they happen almost. And you're able to develop this view of the reality that distinguishes light and darkness. The distinguishing between them become extremely clear. So I knew the Iraq War was a lie before anyone said that it was based on a lie. So having this insight allowed me to make a very easy decision that was going to have very heavy consequences. So I got prepared to go to jail. I said goodbye to my family a few times, but nothing happened. I never met, any of the severe consequences. There were people who opened their mouths and said, I don't really like this war, and they had severe consequences. I actually spoke out, outside the UN during a massive anti-war rally, and nothing happened to me. I got death threats. It was extremely stressful going through that time period, not knowing what was going to happen to you. But that's what sabr is about. That's what patience is about. Sabr means patience. That's what tawakkul is, relying upon whatever God ordains for you, is about. And that's when those things activate within you and the journey becomes smooth. And that journey became smooth for me. Despite the death threats, despite the stress, I was able to sail through it and nothing ever happened to me. I even wrote a manuscript about it. And I call it a manuscript because it was never published. Noam Chomsky said really good things about it, but it was never published. But yeah, I was able to recollect those things. I have absolutely no stress recalling those things. I can talk about those things all day if anyone wants to hang out on the Zoom. But yeah, Sufism, the beautification of the self, the process, it really helps you during your worst times. That was my worst time.
Yeah.
And it helped me out a great deal.
Wow.
I know it seems easy. I actually had to summarize all this within I'm going on 7 minutes now. So I hope I did a good way. I summarized it in a good way that people understand. I don't want to seem arrogant that it was really easy. It wasn't really easy. It was a very difficult time. But self-discipline, that's what self-discipline does. When you practice what the Quran tells you, it makes everything easy for you.
Yeah, I think it's only fair to tell everybody that you and I met on Zoom twice. So we met on one Friday night and talked for at least an hour. And then we waited a week or so. We sort of went through our notes. And then we spoke on another Friday night and sort of refined some of the things that that we had discussed the first time. And that was another hour. So, it's just 2 hours of you and me talking. That sort of boils down to these sort of essential points. And I can't thank you enough for, making yourself available to share this with us. And I just want to say, I scribbled down a couple of notes when you were just saying this last part, because you said, I love what you said, because I'm a psychotherapist and these are things I tell my patients all the time. I have to be telling it to me. And one of the things you said is, as I changed, people around me changed. And it's so true. You cannot change the other. You can only change yourself. And then the other cannot play that same game with you because you're not playing that game anymore. So it's, I've changed. You have to respond in some way, even if it's just to ignore me, but you can't do the old thing because I don't do that now. And the other thing is the patience, the waiting, and again, it's something I tell my patients all the time, to learn to sit with discomfort. That's so hard. That is so hard, to sit with discomfort. And that's what you're sharing with us, is how you went through that. Very frightening. I mean, really frightening. Saying goodbye to your family. I may go to prison. I may go to, God knows what can happen to me. And yet to have that hanging over you and still to be there, to be speaking out, to be speaking at that giant rally, which I was at, but I was in the crowd all the way up, I think, First Avenue, because we went from the United Nations. Leslie Kagan had organized that rally, and they wouldn't give us a permit. They wouldn't give you a permit. And so we just had to be in the street, and we stretched all the way back up First Avenue. I remember it so well. And to have you go through that, to stand up there and talk to those, I don't know, thousands of people standing on First Avenue. I mean, it had to have been terrifying to not know. And yet, patiently, you just did it and you waited with whatever turmoil is going on inside you. And that is just wonderful. And that you could do that, and that you have this spiritual underpinning that allows you to practice in that way. So this is putting your principles into practice. And, for that, I admire you. And I thank you so much for sharing, this experience with us. It's been a wonderful time, just hearing you and talking to you about all of this. So thank you. And I just want to say, you know, we always have our little coffee hour afterwards online. And I hope you'll, if you're able to stick around and join us. And maybe if people want to ask you any questions, that would be a good time for them to do it. So can I invite you to join us for our coffee hour? Online, yes?
Sure.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you so much. And now, pulling my notes together, we are about to have our closing hymn. And so again, this will be with Kevin and Carolyn. So thank you. Go ahead. Thank you, Kevin and Carolyn both. And now Dave will extinguish our chalice.
I invite you to join me in extinguishing our chalice. Please repeat with me if you know the words. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. For these we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Thank you, Dave. And the closing